Now, you might have noticed, but there are a lot of evangelicals who are foaming at the mouth for a war with Iran. They believe that we are approaching the end of times, that Jesus is coming back, the second coming is near, and they're thinking that this war is going to usher in. And I'm going to explain all of that to you, but this is sort of the insanity that we're dealing with and why you're seeing so many people online saying, this is God's war. Donald Trump is God's servant. This is Ambassador to Israel, former governor of Arkansas, Mike Huckabee. He sent this message to Donald Trump, and Donald Trump shared this with his social media following. So this is what Mike Huckabee says. He says, Mr. President, God spared you in Butler, Pennsylvania to be the most consequential president in a century, maybe ever. The decision on your shoulders, I would not want to be made by anyone else. You have many voices speaking to you, sir, but there's only one voice that matters, his voice. I am your appointed servant in this land and am available for you, but I do not try to get in your presence often because I trust your instincts. No president in my lifetime has been in a position like yours, not since Truman in 1945. I don't reach out to persuade you, only to encourage you. I believe you will hear from heaven, and that voice is far more important than mine or anyone else's. You sent me to Israel to be your eyes, ears, and voice, and to make sure our flag flies above our embassy. My job is to be the last one to leave. I will not abandon this post. Our flag will not come down. You did not seek this moment. This moment sought you. It is my honor to serve you, Mike Huckabee. So to understand theologically where Mike Huckabee and many of these other evangelicals who are dispensationalists and who believe that this war, this battle between Israel and Iran and Israel and everybody in the Middle East is God's war, that this is a signaling of the end of times, why they're foaming at the mouth. Glenn Beck is another one who has been talking about this incessantly, very much excited about this war. This is a pastor who is kind of giving a breakdown of the battle of Gog and Magog. And I want to play this for you so that you get an idea of where Mike Huckabee and others, where they're coming from.
The Bible says that this attack at the end of time will come on Israel from the north and the south, and that will be the final war, the war to end all wars that will usher in the end of time. Now, here's the question. Are we entering into that war right now? In Ezekiel 38 and 39, it mentions nations, Gog and Magog. That would be like modern day Russia. It also mentions Persia in Ezekiel 38 and 39. That corresponds to modern day Iran. What we do know is that if Iran enters the war, that Turkey and Russia will probably go with them. Right behind them will be North Korea and China. And if all of the world powers start attacking from the north and the south, start trying to attack Israel, that could be the war to end all wars that ushers in the end of history. You may be going right now like, bro, this is heavy, man. Can I just say this? There's a lot of hope in Ezekiel 38 and 39 because we know how that battle ends. But the Bible says exactly at the moment when it looks like all hope is lost for the descendants of Isaac, that the Lord himself, Jesus Christ, will descend. He will take the battlefield and he will win the war once and for all time.
Okay, let's go ahead and break this down so that we can fully understand this. And let's also explore why they might be very, very wrong. Okay, first of all, what does the prophecy actually say? Because they're interpreting this prophecy. They're saying, this pastor there is saying like Russia and China, and he's kind of bringing in all these players, Turkey. So what does the prophecy actually say? So the prophecy of Gog and Magog appears in two places in the Bible, one in the New Testament and one in the Old Testament. In Ezekiel chapters 38 and 39, which is in the Old Testament, and it also shows up in Revelations chapter 20, which is in the New Testament. So let's focus first on Ezekiel, the Old Testament, the prophecy there. In Ezekiel 38:39, a leader named Gog from the land of Magog is prophesied to attack Israel. Now, Gog leads a coalition of nations. Persia, it's actually named. That would be the interpretation by the evangelicals, by the dispensationalists, is modern-day Iran. Cush is interpreted to be Sudan or other parts of Africa, including Yemen. Put is another place that is named in this prophecy, and that would be modern-day Libya. And Gomar and Togarmah, I can't pronounce this right. Togarmah. Togarma. That is viewed as typically Turkey or regions around Turkey. So Gog apparently comes from the far north, and many believe this refers to Russia. That's why he's pointing to Russia in this prophecy. So here's what's interesting. Ezekiel describes Israel as a land of unwalled villages. That's in Ezekiel 38:11, a land of unwalled villages, also a people gathered from the nations, and a land that is peaceful and unsuspecting with no gates or bars. Now, part of that doesn't really sound like Israel, and we're going to get into that, like a peaceful and unsuspecting people with no gates or bars. But we're going to circle back to how the prophecy describes Israel for when we're going to kind of reimagine this prophecy a little bit. So the setup is this: Israel is living in peace. Then this massive coalition coming from all around them, the north and the south, this coalition attacks. And just when it looks hopeless, the prophecy says God steps in. And God intervenes, causing earthquakes, sending down fire and hail, turning the attackers against each other, destroying them without Israel needing to fight at all. And the world watches in shock. And the point is so that the nations would know I am the Lord. That is the scripture from Ezekiel 38:23, so that nations will know that I am the Lord. So this is seen as a supernatural defense of God's chosen people, that that there was really no fighting needed from the Israelis, that instead God comes and intervenes and helps them out and saves them. Now, many of them interpret that, not the Israelis. They don't fully believe in all of they do believe in some of these prophecies, but not all of them, obviously not the ones in the New Testament. But that's why a lot of evangelicals, you'll hear them talking about Donald Trump and how they'll say, Trump is the force from God so that the Israelis don't have to fight themselves. It's going to be God sending America and Americans to battle it out. And that's where a lot of evangelicals think that is America's intervention. Let me actually show you this. This is actually a Catholic. So what's interesting is Catholics aren't dispensationalists, meaning they don't believe in like the Israeli. Catholics fundamentally believe that the Catholic Church is a continuation of ancient Judaism, that Jesus Christ and the apostles essentially, that the word of God, the religion of God, there was no breaking up of this religion. It just continued on with Jesus Christ and the apostles, and it became the Catholic Church essentially. Dispensationalists believe in kind of periods of time, and they believe that they kind of break up the scriptures into these time periods, and that is why dispensationalists and evangelicals believe in the actual literal gathering of the people of Israel, of the Jews to Jerusalem, whereas Catholics believe that it is in the people, it's like in our hearts, in our spirits, that the Israelite people are all of the people who embraced God and continued on with the church, and that they have gathered spiritually, whereas dispensationalists and evangelicals believe that it has to be physical gathering, a literal gathering of the Jews in Israel. This is a Catholic, however, and some Catholics buy into this a little bit, but this was a note that was posted. You could kind of see that note there in the bottom corner, and that note says, fulfill the prediction of the hermit of Loretto that Donald J. Trump will lead the USA closer to God. Robert Unanue, son of Anthony V. Unanue, I'm not sure how to pronounce that name, and of Goya Foods, Inc. Now, he's referring to this unverified prophecy within the Catholic Church that there was a hermit in Loretto, Italy, and this hermit prophesied that a man with golden hair would lead America back to God. So he's writing this out saying, Donald Trump is going to be that man who leads America back to God. Okay, just something, there's people are believing this as a religious thing, and that's why they're getting into it. Same thing with Israel. A lot of the Israelis, I understand that they're not really religious, and they're using religion to enact their goals, but it's still religion that is being used, religion that people are believing to go along with these things, to go along with genocide, to go along with war, to go along with these notions. And it's important we understand them because it's very difficult to rationalize with religion. But if we understand where people are coming from, why they're championing war, why they're okay with genocide, why they're okay with seeing babies being blown up in Gaza, because they all think it's because of God. I mean, it's important we understand that so that we can at least know what we're dealing with, I suppose, right? Okay, so to continue on with the prophecy, how evangelicals interpret the Ezekiel prophecy today. Many Christians, especially in the U.S., they believe this prophecy is being fulfilled right now, right? Their interpretation goes like this. Modern Israel, founded in 1948, is the biblical Israel in the prophecy of Ezekiel. The attackers, Iran, Russia, Turkey, Hamas, Hezbollah, Yemen, they are today's version of Gog's coalition coming from all sides to attack the Israeli people. The U.S. is seen as Israel's protector, a sort of righteous superpower defending God's people. So that is the supernatural God comes down and rains hellfire and saves the Israeli people. And many believe Donald Trump, he was chosen by God, like King Cyrus in the Bible, to protect Israel and to help fulfill the prophecy. So when war breaks out involving Israel and this exact list of enemies, many evangelicals believe this is it. This is the final war, Gog and Magog. The end of times is here. And they're not afraid. They're excited about this because they believe this means Jesus is about to return. That's the big thing. That's why they want this end of time war. It's not about saving the Jews because they're the chosen people so much. It's not about them really at all. It's that Jesus is about to return. And it's why you'll see people celebrating war, violence, and chaos, because in their worldview, it means victory is near and salvation is coming. But what if the prophecy is misinterpreted? So I want to kind of look at this from a different lens on this, because this is what they're looking at it like, okay, Israel's under attack, this helpless, innocent people. Remember the way that the prophecy described the people of Israel was a land of unwalled villages, a people gathered from the nations. So when you look at Israel, yes, it's true. It's a people gathered from the nations, various nations all around the world. The Israelites are made up of people from Russia, the United States, from the Middle East, or from all over the place, right? So yes, it seems like they fit the definition from the prophecy of a people gathered from the nations. And the other descriptor of this people was a peaceful and unsuspecting people with no gates or bars. Now, I know the Israelis want to think of themselves as a peaceful and unsuspecting people. And I know that many of the evangelicals who love and adore and pledge their allegiance to Israel also view them as a peaceful and unsuspecting people. But I think, let's think about that a little bit more critically. Let's challenge this view. What if modern Israel is not the Israel of the prophecy? What if Gog and Magog aren't Iran and Russia? But what if it's us? What if we're the ones? Now, hear me out. Let's go back to that key phrase from Ezekiel, a land of unwalled villages, peaceful and unsuspecting. Does that sound like today's Israel to you? Israel is heavily fortified with one of the most powerful militaries in the world. It has walls, checkpoints, border control, surveillance, nuclear weapons, and U.S. military backing. It regularly launches airstrikes and drone attacks and military campaigns, including in Gaza, Libya, Lebanon, Syria, and Iran. They're far from unsuspecting. In fact, they're a people that are in constant wartime readiness. They make every single one of the Israelis join the military, serve in the military. They're constantly ready for war. They're constantly waging war. This does not seem like a land of unwalled villages, peaceful and unsuspecting at all. So who today looks more like this vulnerable people living without walls? And let's also go back to the descriptor of a people from the exact one gathered from the nations. Now, you could say, yeah, but these Israelis, they come from all over, whereas like the Palestinians, for example, they've been there for all that time. They're not gathered from all the nations, but instead the Israelis are. They're gathered from all the nations. But what if we're misinterpreting that? The nations The nations could be the tribes of Israel, the 12 tribes of Israel, 10 of which were lost, 10 of which were scattered, or the 10 that were lost. There were 2 that we know of that were driven out, and that is like the modern day Israel. The modern day Jews come from the 2 tribes that remained, that were then driven out of Israel by the Romans and scattered all around the world. But there were 10, which is way more than 2. There were 10 other tribes that were lost. Now, when they say they were lost, what does that mean in biblical terms? That just means they no longer identified as Jews, that they were lost to other cultures, other religions. But if you believe in the biblical prophecy that Abraham and Isaac and Jacob were promised that their children, that their many generations of children would inherit this land, nothing in that interpretation says, and they must identify as Jews and they must practice futuristic Judaism, which is rabbinic Judaism, which looked nothing like the Judaism of the time of the tribes. But nonetheless, like nothing in that interpretation says any of that. It just says your genetic kids are eventually going to inherit this land. It doesn't say anything about how they identify, what they call themselves, what religion they practice. So what if the modern day Palestinians are the lost tribes, the people, the 12 different lands, the 12 different nations that made up the nation of Israel, the 12 different nations? What if the Palestinian people, the people living in that land, they're the ones gathered from the nations. They're the people who have now gathered from the nations, and they're living in a land of unwalled villages, and they are a peaceful and unsuspecting people with no gates or bars. And they were invaded by people from all around the world. They came from the north, they came from the south, they came from everyone. Suddenly, all of these people showed up on their shores, hostile people, and said, we're taking over, and we're here, and it's our land now. God said so. And they started to attack this group of peaceful people who were living, Muslims, Jews, and Christians all living together peacefully at the time, constantly under attack by other nations, whether it be the British Empire or the Ottoman Empire. They've just been an unsuspecting, peaceful people, never, just trying to live their lives, and all of these empires come along and try to take over. So what if we're actually talking about, we are the bad guys, and it's actually the indigenous people, the people who stem from the actual 12 tribes of Israel, the 10 lost tribes? What if they're the ones that are needing the defense and they're the unsuspecting people? So when you look at, they're the ones, the Palestinian people, they're the ones who are being bombed, starved, evicted, left with no defense. The people of Yemen, also Gaza, Syria, even you could even kind of say just around that region, the poor that are being under attack. Now let's look at Gog again. Gog leads in the prophecy a powerful multi-nation coalition. Gog, and they say, Gog comes from the far reaches of the north. Well, we could be considered far reaches of the north. I mean, we're certainly from America, the far reaches of the north. It does mention Persia. We have military bases all around what would have been Persia at the time of this prophecy. when it was written. Persia was larger than just the nation of Iran. It encompassed a lot of areas. So Gog leads a powerful multi-nation coalition. Gog invades and surrounds a weaker land for plunder. Gog is destroyed by divine justice, which hasn't happened yet because the prophecy obviously hasn't been fulfilled, which is what they're looking for. But the question is, if this prophecy were to be real, who would actually get destroyed by God and saved by God from this multinational powerful force? So could Gog actually be the US, Israel, NATO, and allied regimes, military superpowers who surround and attack weaker nations, the true descendants of the Israelite tribes? Could that be the case? And that is something that evangelicals, Christians don't think about. They don't critically think about, wait a minute, what makes you think these people who show up and call themselves Jews or call themselves the descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, what makes you think they actually are? I mean, anyone can make these claims. And just because they identify with a particular religion, just because they claim it, doesn't mean it's actually true. So you have to actually kind of critically think about this before you start pledging your allegiance and allowing babies to be killed and massacred and and genocide it, and you sit there and you cheer it on and support it, you might want to stop and think about this before you cheer all of this on, because I just don't think Jesus and God, if you believe in any of them, I just don't think that Jesus is sitting back right now thinking it's totally fine for these babies to be blown up. It's totally fine to be affecting regime change everywhere you go, threatening everybody with nukes, threatening everybody with total annihilation, and actually pulling it off in a lot of cases, and pillaging and plundering and leaving babies to die and populations enslaved, like what we saw in Libya at the end of Gaddafi. I mean, I just don't know if Jesus Christ is sitting back thinking, that's fine, that's cool, go ahead. I don't know how any Christian could actually believe that. And if that's the case, then Christianity is quite morbid and violent and heinous in a lot of, if that's actually the belief, that is not a peaceful religion. So maybe Israel, the traditional interpretation is that Israel is the modern state of Israel. The reimagined interpretation is that Israel is actually the Palestinians, that they are the true descendants of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, that Gog is not Russia, Iran, and Turkey, but Gog is the United States, Israel, NATO. The good guys are not the U.S. and Israel, but the good guys are those who are being slaughtered, invaded, who are just trying to live peacefully, who are not firing the first shots, who are not, waging world war and threatening everybody. And maybe when we see the end of this, if this is the prophecy, if these are the end of times, then maybe God will come in and actually save the oppressed people rather than helping out the empires who continue to wage war and enact violence on other people. Maybe, just maybe. But this prophecy has been used to justify war by people who believe that they're fulfilling God's plan. And we just got to take a look at that and say, you got to be honest with yourself. Who's the one using the drones? Who's the one with the nukes? Who's the one surrounding cities and calling it security? Who's the one claiming to fight for peace while setting the world on fire? Are you really the good guys? Do you think so, Mike Huckabee? Do you really think, when you put it in that perspective, that we're actually on the side of God? Because, this is a wager that if you lose pretty big. I mean, if you're a religious person and you're actually on the side of evil, because you think you're on the side of God, but you're actually on the side of evil, that's a pretty big gamble. That's a pretty big gamble. It's sort of like Pascal's wager. Right? Pascal's wager being, you're better off believing in God than not believing in God, because if God exists and you don't believe, you might find yourself in hell. And if God doesn't exist, but you did believe, what did you lose? You just lost out on maybe a few parties and some hedonism that maybe you could have partaken in, and you didn't because you thought God existed. But if God exists and you didn't think he did, then you might be facing hellfire. And, this is quite the wager for people to bet on, that Israel, the land that is the most aggressive, warmongery nation in the Middle East, that they're actually the peaceful good guys. You know what? You just might be wrong, and you just might face hellfire. It's just something to consider. Hey guys, thank you for watching this clip from the full Kim Iverson Show, which you could check out Monday through Friday, 5 p.m. Eastern at KimIversonShow.com. See you there.